Welcome to my first video. I am Nicole SD, and I'm sorry about the glare in my glasses, but I can't help that. Uh, I have multiple sclerosis and my memory has been adversely affected. That's why ad-libbing is not a good idea for me. Words often come out wrong and I'll say things like right when I want to say left and things like that. So I do better if I write things down and then read it later. However, if anybody knows a way to get rid of the stupid glare in my glasses without having to blank out the screen, please let me know. Anyway, the Nicole part of my channel name is obviously my first name. And don't worry if you find it strange. A lot of people do, and I've become used to it a long time ago. Just so you know, naming a man Nicole is a French thing. Actually, it's a French-Canadian thing, and to be exact, a not very common thing from a small part of the province of Quebec. The only other non-French male Nicole I've ever heard of is Nicole Williamson, the British actor. Anyway, as I said, I'm from Quebec originally, and like most people my age, I was baptized almost immediately after I was born. Believe me, it's only a slight exaggeration. In those days, people didn't wait long to have their children baptized. I guess it was a leftover from the time when a lot of children died within the first few days of their birth, and baptism was rushed because nobody wanted their child to go to hell. And that's the way things were handled when I was born. So, without anybody asking me what I thought about it, I officially became a good little Catholic boy a few days after my birth. It's also extremely easy for me to prove that I was baptized a Roman Catholic. I don't even have to show any paperwork from the church. What makes it so easy to prove? One of my middle names is Joseph. All good little Catholic boys from Quebec have the name Joseph, and all the girls have the name Mary, plus whatever else their family has agreed to name them. If you don't believe me, ask any Catholic Quebecer in his or her 40s or older if one of their middle names is Joseph or Mary. The answer will always be the same. Why, yes, obviously. I grew up in what I like to call a very homogenized environment. Everybody was white, everybody was French, everybody was Catholic. We didn't even say we were Roman Catholics because we didn't know there was any other kind. So I grew up not questioning those realities. You didn't ask anybody where they came from or if they went to church. We're all part of the same place and we all did the same things. I may not have been very curious about my neighbors, but I was extremely curious about other things. When I was 6 or 7, I took apart a toy electric racing car, and I figured out all on my own how it worked. In school, I felt my teachers never taught me enough stuff, so I started reading book after book after book, and I had this incredible thirst for learning, and I did everything I could to expand my knowledge. I was averaging 5 books per week until I turned 16. My early years were otherwise fairly ordinary, but when I reached my teens, something very important happened to me. It molded me in a way that influenced my entire life. What was it? My parents sent me to an all-boys private school. It was a Catholic institution like many others in Quebec, but there was something special about our teachers. Yes, they were priests, but they had more than a theological background. Each and every one of them had studied in a secular university and had graduated with diplomas in fields like chemistry, physics, biology, geology. And those priests, they expected us to work hard. We had to take every single course they taught in both sciences and humanities. If someone couldn't handle a single subject at the advanced level, he was expelled. It didn't matter if his parents were rich and they could afford to buy the entire school. That kid was out. In grade 8, I was part of a group of nearly 200 students, and after 5 years, there were only 18 of us left. But those years spent at that school were among the best of my life, because I was in an environment where I was encouraged to learn. But the point of this story is not to tell you how difficult it was to graduate from there. What's important is that those priests never hinted a single time that there was something called creationism. God was never mentioned at any time during our science classes. He was only discussed in religion classes. And even there, creationism was never brought up. Both the spiritual and natural worlds were kept separate. Religion was religion, science was science, and the two never mixed. To me, being religious meant believing in God, going to Mass on Sundays, and saying prayers regularly. Without actually saying it, those priests were teaching me that religion and science have nothing to do with one another. I lived happily in this environment, and just like I never questioned the fact that people around me were all white, French, and Catholic, it was just as pointless to assume that science and religion could mix. Not long after, in 20, I moved to the province of Ontario, where I discovered a totally different world. I'm not talking about experiencing a language and culture shock. I mean, it was totally different religiously. It was as if I had stepped back in time and was facing a different kind of fundamentalism that I had never experienced before. Here's a very simple example of what struck me as extremely strange when I arrived. In Quebec, it was very common to see girls and women help the priests celebrate Mass. But when I arrived in Ontario, only boys and men were allowed. One day, a Toronto priest dared to flaunt this rule, and he made the news. His name was all over the papers. I couldn't believe it. This was not the Catholicism I had been brought up in, and I didn't like it. My values didn't have much in common with those priests in the pulpits. That's when I started stepping away from religion. I still considered myself a Catholic, but rarely went to church. I still prayed, but that was about it. Then I started asking myself questions, and as I did, a lot of things started to bother me. The first one had to do with free will. How could man have free will if everything was preordained? To me, Judas was the victim of a very cruel and sadistic joke. He never had any choice. He was doomed from the day he was born to betray Christ. How could he be blamed? How could he be despised? How could he end up in hell when he had been a simple pawn? I also couldn't accept that God could punish people who didn't follow the right religion, whatever that happens to be, especially if they had led a good life. What's more, I came to the conclusion that it was impossible to know which religion was the right one. Every single religion had its own sacred book, and its followers all claimed it held the truth. I never ever believed that homosexuals are an abomination, because they're normal people. They're just like everybody else, just with a different sexual preference. As time went on, the list of things I couldn't accept became longer and longer. Life continued like this for many years, and I probably would have died still believing in some form of creator, had it not been for the born-again Christians and the other evangelical types. As I became more and more aware of their presence, and their preaching. I couldn't believe my ears. Everything they said sent shivers up my spine. They mixed science and religion. That was blasphemy to me. Science took mankind out of the Dark Ages and away from crazy superstitions. We live in a natural world, and there are natural explanations for everything that happens here. What those born-again Christians said went against the most basic things I had been taught by those teaching Catholic priests. I had learned that supernatural causes just don't belong in the natural world. Then I discovered that evangelists believe every single word in the Bible is true, including stories as nonsensical as Noah's Ark and Jonah and the whale. At an early age, I had dismissed those as children's fables, and not a single priest I had ever met tried to tell me or anybody else that those stories were true. As I found out more about the born again, I learned more and more that I had ever known about the Bible, to the point where I could only come to one conclusion. And it can be expressed with 3 short one-syllable words. And they are, I don't know. I don't know if there is or isn't a God, and I don't believe there is any way of knowing for sure. The only certainty in life comes from the natural world, because that's our reality. That's where we live. I will therefore live my life to the best that I can and not worry about anything else. Believe it or not, I'm at peace with that.